What if the foods you've been eating to get healthy might be making you sick? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is Sally K. Norton. We're going to discuss toxic superfoods, and it all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long. Guys TV, Guys Radio. Thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, it is the interview portion of our show, and I'm delighted to have a return guest today. Today, we're going to talk about a term that is on the tip of everybody's tongue who's interested in dietary health, oxalates. And my special guest returning is kind of the goddess of oxalate prevention, if you will, Sally Norton. Let me tell you a little bit about Sally. She was on the show when the book came out called Toxic Superfoods for our YouTube and Rumble viewers here. Toxic Superfoods, how oxalate overload is making you sick and how to get better. And you see on the cover, there's beets and spinach and some berries on there and chocolate and other things, star fruit, things that you would typically think are good for you, but you might find out that they're not. And Sally's going to tell us all about that. A little bit about Sally's background and pedigree. Master of Public Health degree from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, managed 5 years National Institute of Health funded program at UNC Medical School, clinical consultant on a team incorporating holistic healing into care plans for critically ill patients, contributing author, managing editor for a series of monographs on integrating complementary healing practices into conventional medical care. It goes on and on. Sally kind of came up with putting oxalates into the forefront a couple of years ago. I had her on the show then. We got a great response, and now everybody's talking about oxalates. People, when I'm having conversations with friends and folks about diet and this and that, I say, what's your oxalate intake? And at least half of them know what I'm talking about now. And that's such a great thing, and we can attribute it all to our special guest on Guys Radio. Welcome back, Sally Norton, and Sally is an MPH. Welcome back to the show, Sally.
Robert, it's so fun to be with you again. Year and a half later, checking in, it's fun.
Yeah, so as I said, it's been close to 2 years since we last spoke, and it seems like because of your book and your work, oxalates is at the forefront of discussions about healthy eating. But for many, oxalates are still an unknown and a mystery. So maybe just to set the table for everybody, no pun intended, what are oxalates and why can they be toxic to our health?
Well, from a familiarity standpoint, they're the main ingredient in a kidney stone. So most everybody knows what a kidney stone is. So oxalates are these crystals that form from oxalic acid, and oxalic acid is made by plants and funguses and so on. In the produce department, there's several foods that are loaded with oxalic acid, and we eat enough of it that acid gets into the body. It starts making little crystals with the calcium and other minerals in your blood and tissues and can start accumulating in the body and cause real health problems because it's a toxin.
Would this be the same as uric acid?
No, it's not the same as uric acid at all. In fact, there's some small, preliminary evidence that suggests that the body uses uric acid to dissolve calcium oxalate crystals in joints and so on. And the body uses uric acid and makes uric acid itself for various purposes, including possibly anti-inflammatory purposes. So uric acid also becomes crystals in the urine and elsewhere. And we tend to blame uric acid crystals for gout. But chances are that there's quite a bit of oxalate gout going on, that you get calcium oxalate crystals, not just in your kidneys, but in your joint spaces and your bones, in your bone marrow, and maybe your brain and teeth and jaw, eyes, thyroid gland, you name it.
It's just absolutely amazing. And there's such intricacies into learning about oxalates and even the difference between uric acid and the oxalate issues, because I myself have had a kidney stone, and I had actually had 2 operations on my kidneys back 10 years ago. And I know the pain and discomfort of a kidney stone. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And after reading your book, I changed my diet and I haven't had any issues. And I've read a lot about it. And also gout, which people think, it's something that you get on a ship or something if you're a pirate. But really, gout can be something that you get in your big toe. A lot of people have it, and I have it in my left big toe. And I notice if I'm tense and things flare up, sometimes I have an issue. I use some CBD on it, but also I'm mindful of my diet. And I've read that it's about uric acid, and you're saying it's not. So it's another thing. It's another issue that people have. So what can you tell us a little bit about gout?
Gout is a great topic because they've really changed their understanding of what gout really is. They tend to think of it in the old days as what we call articular tissue problem, like a joint problem, but it's really an inflammatory issue, that something's turning on inflammation in tissues, and often that involves the joints. And when the body goes after these oxalate crystals that are forming in joints, you can get a gout flare called oxalate gout. There's at least 4 or 5, or maybe 6, at least 4 or 5 anyway, types of crystals that can form in joint spaces and inspire a gout attack. And it's really when the body's trying to resolve those crystals where you get this inflammation. So gout is almost like the itching of a bug bite a day later. The bug bit you yesterday, but then you get this raised red annoying welt the next day. And that raised red irritation is the body's attempt to remove the pollution from the bug bite, the toxin. So when we change our diets to a low oxalate diet, the body may still have lots of residue of oxalate in all kinds of tissues, including joint spaces. And over the years of kind of without oxalate in the diet, with way less oxalate in the diet, your body now has more ability to remove that from the tissue, and you can get gout flares after you go on a low oxalate diet as part of the getting rid of the oxalate from your tissues.
Amazing. How did, just for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, how did you kind of, I don't want to say stumble upon as a negative, but how did you come upon all this information about oxalates? Because now it's at the forefront, and you were kind of, I think, one of the first people who really identified that this is an issue. Because if you look at some of the foods that people think and have been consuming as really healthy, like spinach, like star fruit, like beets, like dark chocolate, like a lot of berries. And the fact of the matter is these foods can be toxic. How did you learn that? Were you going through your own issues?
Yes, I was going through my own issues and stumbled upon it on the internet, because in the modern era, I wasn't the first person. The really first person in the modern era was a woman named Joanne Yant, who founded the Vulvar Pain Foundation, goes by VP Foundation, who was helping initially women with genital pain. And it turns out men get scrotal pain and other forms of genital pain and other forms of pelvic pain, heaviness and problems with the urinary tract. And it turns out that whole crew is also having issues with connective tissue problems, with things like gout and weak connective tissue and tendonitis and you name it. And so they've been at that for over 30 years. And I had a brief attack of vulvar pain, and my husband did a web search and found them. And I started to learn more about which foods had oxalate in them back in 2009. Now, the real innovators who recognize that oxalate in the diet causes health problems, mood changes, gastrointestinal problems, pain syndromes, personality changes, was a group of physicians in the early 1800s. And by 1842, they had named this the oxalate, or they called it the oxalic acid diathesis. So they had already recognized in the 1840s and earlier how toxic oxalate was. People were accidentally dying from consuming oxalic acid. They were taking the powder that's used as a cleaner. That's another sidetrack. So back in 2009 was when I first found the Vulvar Pain Foundation. However, there was a lot of missing information, and I'm very sciencey and logical, and it just wasn't making sense. And I thought it was just a minor thing that bothered people with pelvic pain. But in 2013, I now knew when I was eating high oxalate foods. So now I could correlate my symptoms to my diet in a way I never could before. Because when you think about food, you think about calories and fat and protein and carbs and salt. You don't think about oxalates, so it's a new lens, it's a new set of glasses in which to evaluate your diet and what you're exposing yourself to and how that might connect to your suffering. So I had added kiwis back to my diet and some sweet potato here and there and some celery. And I developed, over a course of months of doing kiwi pretty much every day, severe stiffness, severe arthritis, which I had had in my 20s and now was back with revenge and kind of banshee severity. And I was just like, what the heck? And it just dawned on me, wait a minute, oxalates aren't just pelvic pain, it can be arthritis too. But I was at the time suffering with a sleep disorder and was interested in fixing my sleep problem, which I thought had some dietary connection to chronic constipation and what they call the sort of autotoxemia that comes from the wrong bacteria putting out too many toxins, and you can get sick on that and get brain problems. So I thought I had to fix my constipation. And now I had to fix my arthritis. And so I got more serious about the diet, got rid of the kiwi, completely outlawed sweet potatoes, and quit the celery. And in 10 days, I was feeling much better. The sleep problem was clearing up. And over the course of that, many things got better. This really surprised me because I was thinking that each of these problems were separate things, for separate causes. I didn't know it was one cause, that my healthy diet was poisoning me and causing all kinds of problems for my nervous system and my connective tissues and my digestive tract.
It's interesting because there's some proponents, as you're aware of, who like celery juice all the way and use that. And I guess the question is, can some of these protocols, whether it's celery juice or something else, where you get sick, or not you specifically, but somebody like yourself gets ill and somebody else gets benefits from it, or can you get benefits and ill depending on your body chemistry and one outweighs the other? Because a lot of people do the whole celery juice thing and they seem to get some benefits out of it. Now, I don't know. I've done it myself and I found some benefits. But I'm totally down with the whole oxalate thing because I've cut out certain foods and I've noticed a difference.
Isn't this a paradox?
Yeah.
It's partly why this is so hard to see, because you start adding these foods, which have a healthy halo in our minds. You get a huge placebo effect when you take on any ritualized thing that takes little effort. The more ritual around it, the more you get the placebo effect, which is somehow your healing aligns with your belief system and you get a good response from your body because you believe in it bad enough. And so that'll carry you for a while. The other thing is when you embark on something like a celery juice thing, suddenly you're drinking a lot less alcohol and eating a little bit less junk here and there, and you're really cleaning things up. So the gums are gone, the deep fat fried French fries. You wouldn't dare eat French fries the same day you're doing celery juice, right? That just doesn't go together. So you're fixing a lot of other things at the same time, maybe cutting out other high oxalate foods that compensates for it for a while. But over time, when you start doing this day in and day out, this low grade toxicity of the oxalates, think of it as like mercury contamination of fish. If you eat too much swordfish and you start eating that a few times a week for a while, you will get mercury poisoning, but you're not going to notice it. You're going to love your swordfish. Same kind of problem where essentially there's some good electrolytes in the celery. There's some good things there, some nice structured water. Seems innocent enough, but underneath there's enough of oxalate that if you do it routinely, you start overwhelming your body's capacity to deal with it. You're exceeding what you're built to handle. And that toxicity builds up over time. So you don't see an immediate bad response to these foods. You've got that placebo effect, you've got that good behavior, you've got the slowness of the toxicity to rear its ugly head because your body really tries not to complain. It doesn't say, hey, bud, that's too much oxalate. It says, okay, I'll hold on to this for a while. When you quit your celery, I'll deal with it. And it's putting up with it like some kind of, subservient wife, like putting up with your bad habits, and you're going to pay later. And in a way, you can't see it. Even in that same day, see, I was eating sweet potatoes every day for years. I got so I couldn't eat beans and bread anymore. So I was looking for a starch, and that was the convenient fill-in for my bread and beans starch. And I developed pretty quickly pains at bedtime in my back, right near the shoulder blade where the rhomboid was. It's like a little knife there. That makes it hard to sleep. I started getting wrinkles. I started getting age spots. At the time I was in my 30s. I didn't know what an age spot was. The dermatologist had to tell me. It's like, oh, that's not good news. And later it became bedtime hiccups and bedtime belching attacks. And this was 4 hours or less from dinner, which was loaded with sweet potatoes, sometimes with Swiss chard on the side. Swiss chard is probably the worst high oxalate food in terms of amount of oxalate in it. And I didn't know that a 4-hour delay is what it takes for you to really overload your bloodstream and overload your kidneys and get your nervous system so toxic that it starts having these spasms. Basically, hiccups are nervous system spasms where the nerves are stuck on and firing inappropriately, and that causes muscle twitches and spasms that can look like belching and hiccups and other forms of twitches and maybe even restless leg.
Amazing. My special guest on Guys Radio, the one and only Sally K. Norton, MPH. We're talking about toxic superfoods, and there's a new book, The Data Companion to Toxic Superfoods. It breaks everything down so you can know exactly how many oxalates are in what food and help you on your path there. So, for people who are unaware, what actually do oxalates do that causes the pain, that causes the discomfort, that causes the issues? Is it like some of these roughage type plants and all have little spikes on them, and that cuts up your system? Is it something like that?
Well, it's multiple ways that it can get you because, as you are implying, oxalate can be these crystals, and you can eat oxalic acid as this dissolved little ionic molecule that's just in the water fraction of food and just floats in your bloodstream. But plants turn some of their oxalic acid that they make into crystals, calcium oxalate crystals, and they're very sharp. They have all this array of shapes that the plant deliberately constructs these shapes, and it's like eating ground glass or sandpaper, and that is quite abrasive. Those calcium oxalate crystals are harder than your teeth. You can think of them as like bits of quartz, or silica. And so even chewing too many crystals, if you chew much, today's people, we don't chew, we put it in a blender and suck it. But there was a time when we chewed on plants and you could literally wear your teeth down doing that. And those crystals are bigger or as big as your cells and can stab right through them in your digestive tract. So that can cause some real serious irritation over time. So there's that, and the immune system gets upset and you increase your pro-inflammatory chemistries with these cytokines and so on, and can get some generalized inflammation from distress in the gut. And gut problems are considered, or were considered in the 1840s, as almost universally present when there is oxalate poisoning going on. But that acid, it has this negative charge, and it can drop a proton and have a double negative charge. And that's why it loves calcium, because calcium is a positive, and the positive and negative get together and you form these little oxalates. Now it's called a salt because it's connected to a mineral. And those little salts can connect in pairs and become nanocrystals. So you get these crystals. So where is it getting the calcium from to form calcium oxalate? From your bloodstream and your tissues and so on. And the little crystals that form have this electromagnetic charge that tends to damage membranes, including membranes they're not even touching, including the mitochondrial membranes inside your cells. Those are the organelles that produce energy and help regulate metabolism in all kinds of ways. You end up with energy crises in cells. You end up with cells with damaged membranes. You end up with a loss of potassium and electrolytes in the process, and lower levels of calcium in the blood. All of those things disturb nerves particularly much, because nerves must, like all cells, but even more critically, control calcium and move calcium around multiple times in a nanosecond, because that's how it conducts electric charges down the axon of the nerves. So now you've interrupted the electricity of the nerve function, and the nerves get stuck in this hyperexcited state and can't turn off. And so they're in a damaged state, and that is causing problems that can precipitate pain, mood changes. You can start to become apathetic and demotivated, despondent, anxious, have panic attacks, get depressed. These are all part of the chronic inflammation that cell damage will create. So as cells get leaky and sick, the immune cells come along and say, "Oh, darling, look, you're leaking. We need to get you gone," and it starts causing more inflammation to address the damage. And you eat this stuff breakfast, lunch, and dinner, potentially, if you have tea with breakfast or sweet potato with breakfast or spinach on your omelet, or have a smoothie, God forbid, a green smoothie with spinach in it. These breakfasts are not so good. Or say almond butter on whole wheat toast, that would be high oxalate. So then you go have lunch, and it's easy to pick out some French fries for lunch, or who knows, pizza with spinach on it. There's all kinds of ways to get into trouble, and you're snacking on some trail mix full of nuts and little chocolate chips. And then you treat yourself to a little piece of chocolate at the end of the day for a pick me up for the drive home. And then dinner, more oxalate. So you're doing this multiple times a day, every day, potentially. If you just happen to pick a food like potatoes or sweet potatoes or beets or chard or spinach or berries or chocolate or nuts as a kind of daily thing, I mean, who isn't doing one of those foods practically every day?
Can people, by properly hydrating, uh, get a lot of these oxalates out of their system so they don't build up?
Well, the folks who study the capacity of the body to release oxalate out of the body are the kidney guys, because the kidney is the organ of detox for water soluble things. So oxalic acid is technically water soluble. So primarily the kidneys have the main job to get rid of it, and they have a certain capacity. Also, the bloodstream has a certain tolerance for oxalate that's quite low, because oxalate keeps messing up the calcium levels in the blood. And when the calcium levels drop, that's called hypocalcemia. That causes a lot of problems. The pacemaker, the heart starts not knowing what to do, and you get arrhythmias, and you can literally have something called heart block, which is a type of heart attack because of the interference of the pacemaker. So the kidneys, what the research suggests is that you can safely excrete about 25 milligrams of oxalate a day. And your liver
That's very
literally
low. That's very low, right?
not very much. That's the safe level. If you go up to 30, you double your chance of a kidney stone. You go up to 40, again, you're doubling, and some people are peeing out close to 100 milligrams a day and not know it. If you get a lot of cloudy urine, that could be because the oxalate's forming crystals in the urine when it hits the bladder or wherever. And you can see kind of thick, a little bit opaqueness in the urine. It shouldn't be the least bit opaque. That could be oxalate crystals. And some of us can pee out a lot of it and do okay. I've had cloudy urine since I was a teenager, and I didn't know why. No one ever told me why. In my day, they used to turn in a urine sample every year for an annual physical. And they never mentioned that I had cloudy urine and that mattered, but that's called crystalluria. It's like you're not supposed to have that. So some of us can pee out lots of oxalate and apparently get away with it. But in the meantime, I have arthritis and back pain, trouble thinking, and I need glasses, and I ended up with a thyroid problem, and it goes on and on.
Let's get to the crux of it for our audience, and that is who, particularly those who are not that aware of oxalate. What are the real main offenders? I know there's a great visual on the cover of your book where you have spinach and you have beets and you have star fruit and you have raspberries and blackberries and spinach, of course, dark chocolate, nuts, looks like almonds there. So these are like avoid at all cost, or can you have a little bit of those? And what are some of the other foods that people have to be aware of?
So the other foods include most of the nuts, like peanuts and cashews would be other ones to be concerned about. Bran, so whole grains, and the alternative grains that people use when they go on gluten-free, like buckwheat, quinoa, and teff. There's turmeric is another one that's real popular. So those are the main ones, but those are popular foods. I mean, think peanuts, potatoes, chocolate. I mean, who gets past their first birthday without a lot of that? And then there's the pureed beets and the pureed sweet potatoes in babyhood. So like they start hitting your plate pretty early in life. And so, yeah, you've got to lower them. I would say it depends on which ones you're really leaning on for day-to-day staples. It's that stuff that you're eating day in and day out that needs to be reconsidered. And so of the 4 or 5 ones that you eat all the time, like I was eating Swiss chard since I was a kid, or beet greens a lot. And beet greens and Swiss chard, that's easy to avoid. Once you know they're not healthy, I thought they were healthy. So that some things are really easy. I would start with that and just plan to not eat them very much. And if you get a salad at the restaurant with a few of those in there and you eat a few, that's not a problem. It really is about dose makes the poison. And for me, using sweet potatoes, that sweet potatoes seem to be quite terrible. Regular potatoes that we make French fries, tater tots, and potato chips are pretty bad. And they have no redeeming feature. They're not a health food. So if you could swear off potatoes, that'd be great. And there's other substitutes you can have instead, like cauliflower, turnips, rutabaga. You can mix a little bit of the new potatoes. They're a little lower in oxalate than the Idaho big ones. They're much higher. So maybe if you mix some of the new potatoes with some cauliflower and made your mashed potatoes that way for home cooks, that's a nice way to have it all. You can have your experience of mashed potatoes and not poison yourself with it.
How about some of the, indulgence that people seem to enjoy? Alcohol, red meat. I know you're into the paleo diet, I believe, from reading some of your posts. I don't eat meat myself, so I don't know if I haven't eaten meat for like 15 years. So I'm working with the low oxalate diet and trying to figure out, well, can I eat this? Can I eat that? So there's two questions. One is about alcohol and two is about meat or some type of protein.
When I first started this, I thought, well, this is the sin diet because you get to drink, you get to have your coffee, you get to have your meat and your butter and your cream and a little bit of like this is the greatest diet. You can have all the indulgence foods. I mean, people generally love meat. We've been hunters on this planet since the dawn of our time, and we naturally gravitate to eating meat. Meats and animal foods do not have substantial oxalate in them at all. So an easy way to avoid oxalates is to start eating more animal foods and just kind of displacement, get full and happy on a buttered steak and you're good to go. And I really believe that animal foods and flesh foods have so many important nutrients. It is harder to impossible to get from plants that most of us do better if we include some animal foods in the diet. And for some people, that means oysters and shrimp and eggs and cheese. And those are all fairly easy to do.
How
So
about how
then
about alcohol?
alcohol doesn't have a lot of oxalate in there. Some of the beers have some oxalate in them, but basically distilled alcohol is not got oxalate in it.
Okay, so you mentioned in the book there's like kind of two phases, and one is really, I guess, it's kind of education. You call it get out of danger. So you really have to identify where are my weak points in terms of the oxalate intake, and second is switching, nuancing yourself towards a low oxalate diet, and that makes perfect sense because there's a lot of there's a learning curve here, and then you have to adapt, and you can't just flip the switch on your diet. I mean, we're creatures of habit, so it takes some time. I noticed for myself, I cut out when I read your book and we talked last time, I cut out spinach. I haven't touched it since then. So that's been a good thing. I cut out peanut butter, which I love. I usually have a spoon of it in the morning with honey and some bee pollen. I cut that out for a year. I'm back to just that little spoon. So shame on me. I got to cut it out again. It's just one of my fetishy type things. Beets, the only time I've used beets is like every once in a while because I had some left over, the beet powder to put in a shake. And I wanted to ask you, is beet powder, I guess it's beet ground up, so you're getting oxalates.
You are.
Okay.
So in moderation, you can get away with these depending, it's a case by case thing. But there are other substitutes for the nut butter. You could do, there was a brand, I don't know if it's still available, called No Nut Butter that's made from yellow split peas, and it's very low in oxalate. The yellow split peas, the green peas are pretty low in oxalate. Now, there's a lot of lectins in peas and legumes, more in the lentils. So if you have digestive problems, that may not agree with you necessarily, but nuts have the same problem where they're hard on the gut. There's also, if you don't mind it being green, Kermit was green and we love him. There's pumpkin seed butter. Pumpkin seeds are very
Okay,
low.
pumpkin's very good, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and the pumpkin seed butter turns out is a great substitute for tahina, which is the sesame paste that's used in like Middle Eastern cooking and so on. So that's pretty, it's a little more expensive, but it's very versatile, except its greenness, which, you learn to love green. And then, there are other things we can do, but getting away from these habits where maybe we can improve the quality of the diet. I mean, I would prefer you to have some hard-boiled eggs or cottage cheese or something for breakfast.
Now, some folks say eggs, and some folks say eggs are great, and other folks say eggs are bad, and they and I think you know who I'm referring to. It's the same person who loves celery juice hates eggs. So
Yeah,
it's confusing there because I haven't eaten that many eggs since then because I'm trying to like take a little bit of what everybody has to say and balance it. And the other one is turmeric, where supposedly it's anti-inflammatory, yet in this case, it sounds like it causes inflammation.
right. So let's talk about eggs and then turmeric.
Okay.
So if you read science and you believe people who are like the chair of the nutrition department at a major university, choline is critical. Choline is a nutrient in egg yolks. Egg yolks deliver the best source, highest amount, best quality choline you can get. critical to the development of human intelligence. And eggs could be considered an important food for all pregnant women, at least a minimum of an egg every day, preferably more than that. Very important for developing children. And to anyone who has anxiety conditions, probably are low on choline and are needing to supplement. So go ahead and have some eggs for your brain. The egg yolk itself is the most complete food on the planet. It has pretty much everything you need in it.
Okay.
It's for anyone to demonize it. Yes, you may not be able to eat eggs. A lot of us are allergic to eggs. Eggs are among the top 5 or 6 allergens, like corn, wheat, soy, peanuts, eggs, and dairy. And, you know, the certain vaccines, like the MMR vaccine, are made in an egg culture. So when they were injecting a substance to tell your immune system to respond to this and attack it, they're teaching your immune system to attack eggs. I think that's one reason egg allergy can be pretty common. If you've had a lot of vaccines repeated, you may be more prone to that egg allergy. So the only bad thing about eggs is that you're allergic to them. Or if you overeat them, don't eat a dozen a day. That's too much vitamin A. You can get vitamin A toxicity from eggs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Turmeric.
Turmeric. Curcumin extract might have some medicinal properties that might be worth playing with. Maybe. The science is not clear. Now, people do think that turmeric supplements help them. It's hard to distinguish the placebo effect from anything else. If it's really helping you, switch from the turmeric whole root, which is very high in oxalate, to the curcumin extract, which is almost no oxalate whatsoever.
Okay. How about tea? You mentioned tea, and I just was listening to an expert about the wonders of green tea in terms of anti-carcinogen. And also, I am a fan of rooibos and hibiscus tea. I like to have them in the evening. I drink coffee, black coffee, and sometimes I'll have an iced coffee or something, but I don't go crazy on coffee the way a lot of people do. What's your perspective on coffee and then tea, and specifically some of those herbal teas?
So the herbal teas, rooibos, you name it, they don't have oxalate in them.
Okay, great.
So almost all the herbal teas are almost free of oxalate. Ginger root tea will have a little bit of oxalate, maybe 7 or 8 milligrams per cup. Ginger's a lovely medicinal herb too. Has some benefits potentially. So the tea's fine. Coffee doesn't have any oxalate. And then what was the other thing we were mentioning?
Green tea?
Okay, so the tea, I talk about this in Toxic Superfoods. There are plenty of studies that demonstrate that especially these herbal supplements that add green tea and teas to them become quite toxic. So chances are that the tea has more toxicities than it has the medicinal benefits. But we use tea often to manage the oxalate problem, believe it or not. We use it as the medication often to help us manage the fact that we are overloaded with oxalate in our tissues, not just once your diet has too much oxalate in it, your kidneys can't get rid of it and you're eating it routinely, it's building up in your system. And chances are, very good chance you have oxalate crystals like microscopic kidney stones in your thyroid gland, in the tendons of your neck and head, in your jaw, in your shoulder joint, in your bone marrow, you name it. And now you're trying to get rid of it. And if the body starts dissolving out and moving out these crystals out of your joints and so on so quickly, you can be toxic all over again with oxalic acid. And that process is very inflammatory, and that's kind of a dangerous state to stay in. You don't want to stay in a inflammatory state for very long. I mean, when you die in the hospital of sepsis, it's your own inflammation that basically takes you off the planet. The overreaction to the infection or the overreaction to these crystals, it's the same immune system fighting for the cause, trying to help you out, but kind of overdoing it. So we try to moderate that by telling the body, wait, no, I'm really eating oxalate. So you have to go back to holding it. Would you please just hold on to it for a minute? I'm going to eat some. And you give it some tea. The tea is all soluble oxalic acid in a liquid form. You start absorbing that within 5 minutes, because right from your stomach, you can absorb that soluble oxalic acid in that watery tea. And the body starts to go, oh, you mean you're eating this again? Okay, guys, quit. And it just kind of calms down that overinflammation and you can feel better. So we use tea as a way of delivering enough oxalate to have a medicinal effect to try to manage this if you get into this kind of clearing illness process.
For regular consumption, then I'm going to get this straight. Green tea, because I read and heard another expert say, the wonder food, if you will, for anti-cancer is green tea on a regular daily basis. You would say no to that?
I'm not
Or,
convinced. I'm
okay.
not convinced. Anti-cancer is lots of things.
Mhm.
The overall picture of the way we live, that's really important.
Okay.
Getting sunshine, not getting other forms of radiation,
Right.
not being poisoned, being well nourished. You cannot green tea your way out of
Okay.
a toxicity
Gotcha.
problem.
How about alkaline water? I'm in Carlsbad. They have fresh water that comes from the earth, and I drink it all the time. I don't drink it with food because I want the hydrochloric acid in my stomach to do its job. But having had, faced cancer 10 years ago, I want to raise my alkaline in my
Yeah,
body. So I drink alkaline water at appropriate times during the day, and it makes me feel good. I don't haven't had any issues with it. What's your sense on alkaline in terms of helping to keep you healthy? Alkaline water.
this is important. And you can get a sense of how acidic your system is if you use pH paper and measure the pH of your urine.
Right.
And if you can keep your urine at 6.5 or near
Mhm.
7 pH, more or less, most of the time it's going to bounce around a lot, then you're doing a good thing. Because acidity does promote metastases of cancer, osteoporosis, all kinds of health problems, and it makes you feel bad. And when your system has gone acidic, you feel overwhelmed and you just don't feel like yourself. So it's very good to do to care about that acidity because inflammation creates acidity. The oxalic acid is an acid that promotes acidity in the body, and the inflammatory response to the oxalic acid in the crystals in the body promotes this acidity. And people get into very acidic diets, being in ketosis all the time. That's a place where you're going to be acidic and so on. And you can't just use celery juice to fix your acidity. You really do better with citrates like lemon juice. In the oxalate world, half a cup of lemon juice a day is enough to dissolve these oxalate crystals, improve the pH of your urine, and protect you and even reverse kidney stones. So
Yeah.
a lemon is a great way to do alkalization as well as the water and Alka-Seltzer Gold, potassium bicarbonate. Any of the calcium is the chalk that's fairly alkalizing. Minerals are basically alkalizing, and the citrate supplements, calcium citrate, magnesium citrate, and so on, are alkalizing. So I highly recommend that people do think about if you don't feel good a lot of the time, maybe you have a kind of inflammatory acidity going on.
Okay. Calcium citrate, magnesium citrate, and I believe charcoal. My wife and I do a kind of a protocol for a month every January where we drink this mixture. And I think I got it from, I think Dr. Berg, Eric Berg. And the theory behind it, Sally, is that it goes in where the stones are formed and there's a coating that protects them. And this kind of flushes everything through and everything out. So we do this for a month. I find myself having like no inflammation while I'm doing this. I don't know if it's placebo effect or not. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'll tell you what it does in terms of kidney stones anyway. The magnesium in your urine keeps the oxalic acid in a soluble state, so it's less likely to hit calcium and become little stones. So it keeps it from getting stuck in the body. The citric acid molecule sticks on these calcium oxalate crystals and tugs at the calcium so strongly that it turns, remember I said those crystals are like
Mhm.
quartz?
Yep.
It turns them into chalk. Basically, it softens that connection. So you soften those stones and they break up really much easier. And the calcium is the main binder of oxalate. So calcium draws oxalate out through the colon and supports the body and tells the body, hey, you've got your binder. Now you can get rid of oxalate. So calcium is a great detox molecule. You tend to need these minerals. Most people are deficient in calcium and magnesium and don't know it. And the citric acid is a great tonic for anything that bothers you. So
And,
yeah, I
and
can see.
can dairy then? I think he mentions also like dairy can also help as part of this protocol pull some of this stuff out for some bizarre reason.
Probably the calcium.
Okay. Okay. Makes perfect sense. So
Calcium is a very valuable, critical molecule that has a bad reputation undeserved.
got it.
Yeah.
So one of the protocols that I do every morning, Sally, is I bring a bottle of the alkaline water with me to bed, and if I wake up in the middle of the night I'm thirsty, I just chug. So I'm done with it by the morning. which helps me hydrate because I don't really go around hydrating all the time during the day. I get busy, and at least I know I have that as a starting point. The other thing I do is I get up and I have a half of an organic lemon squeezed into a big glass of purified water, and I drink that. And then half hour later, maybe I'll have the little honey with a bee pollen type of thing. But that seems to get me my body off to a really good start. Makes me feel good. Is this placebo effect, or this sounds like it's something very good for you?
Very good. If I were you, I would make it a whole lemon and I would do another
Okay.
half lemon with the honey and really up the lemon game. I think it's excellent to drink overnight. For people who are waking up overnight to pee,
Mhm.
your bladder is intended to stay able to hold your urine all night long. You're supposed to be able to sleep 8, 9, 10 hours. If you're getting up, that's a sign your bladder is a little bit distressed, and it could be from oxalate. So oxalate will bother your bladder, bother your kidneys. And if you're getting up a lot, that could be a sign that you have oxalate problem.
Mhm. Now, last question. Cranberry. I take a cranberry supplement to keep my urinary tract clean. Is cranberry on the bad list or the good list or the neutral list?
It's pretty low, very low in oxalate, very low. So it's a good list if
Okay.
it agrees with you.
So I got to tell you, audience, just you can tell this is a great conversation. Sally is wonderful. The name of the book, which I highly, highly, highly recommend, is Toxic Superfoods: How Oxalate Overload is Making You Sick and How to Get Better. And it's just you want to get as much information as possible and then make your own decisions. And Sally's not saying you can't have any of this stuff ever, but you have to be smart about it because it's very insidious how some of these toxic superfoods work, where you don't think they're hurting you, and they are over time because they're building up. And I got to tell you, the last thing I would wish on anybody is a kidney stone, because it's unbearably distressful, as anyone who's had one knows. And you'll do anything you can do to change your behavior to prevent them from happening in the future. And I have, and I had some issues 10 years ago. I haven't had them since, but I made the changes that are necessary. And Sally, please, in closing, tell people how they have to really do some things to really improve their health. You can't just like read the book and put it aside. You have to change your behavior, correct?
You do have to roll your sleeves up and you be patient with yourself and keep coming back around and keep trying things. So just start with something easy and just try to not forget, tune back into your original source. Leave a note to yourself, reminder in your phone. Don't forget you're learning about oxalate, because we keep getting distracted by the latest bauble. So your intentions may have been good here in September, but come Christmas, you're distracted with everything else, So you need to find a way to stick with it, because this really is a lifestyle that'll make a big difference for you over the long run if you keep with it for a long run. And it becomes so easy once you're not you're preferring to leave as few of those oxalates in your diet as you can. And then you're in a position to help other people and make sure the next generations are not completely oblivious to this potential problem, because it really can affect children and the whole thing. You don't want to see your grandkids sick.
Yeah, amazing, amazing work. The book, Toxic Superfoods, and the new one is Data Companion for Toxic Superfoods. There it is. Sally, tell everybody where they can find you and learn more about you and pick up books.
So my website is sallyknorton.com. That's headquarters central. Come there. You can learn about the support groups. You can buy the data companion from my website only. It's not available on Amazon. Toxic Superfoods, you can find a link at my website, but it's available wherever books are sold, in either an ebook, an audio book, or the print book, or all three. And then there's a cookbook on my website that's a PDF. We're going to make that available hopefully before the end of 2024, so you can buy it in a print book like the Data Companion. And so that'll get you started.
Amazing. Well, you do tremendous work. I love having you on your show. We'll do it again. I'm going to keep up. You've been an inspiration to me and to so many others. Thank you for the work, Sally K. Norton.
Lovely.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys Guys TV and Guys Guys Radio, please support us by subscribing to our channels and platforms. Thank you.